The air on planet Cathar was thick with gray dust and the smell of metal. The twin suns had set hours ago, leaving the land cold and quiet. Only the soft hum of wind moved across the barren ground. Near a broken ridge, a lone human named Jack trudged through the wasteland, his boots sinking into the soft sand. He had come to this world with a small rescue team, searching for survivors after a mining outpost was destroyed by raiders. But when the team's ship was damaged in a storm, Jack became separated. For 3 days, he had wandered alone, surviving on rations and hope. He was checking his scanner for signals when he heard a sound that froze him in place. A child's cry. It was faint, broken by the wind, but clearly not human. Jack turned his head, his breath forming a small mist in the cold air. The cry came again, higher this time, filled with panic. Without thinking, he ran toward it. At the base of a cracked cliff, he saw her, a small alien child, no older than 7 by human guess. Her skin had a faint silver tone, her large eyes glowing softly with fear. She was clutching a torn blanket and trembling. When she saw Jack, she stepped back uncertain, but her voice cracked as she shouted, "Please, please help, my mommy's tied to a rock." Jack slowed his steps, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. Hey, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. Where is she?" he asked gently. The little girl pointed toward a narrow ravine. Her voice shook as she said, "They left her there. The bad ones. They said the night creatures will come." Jack's heart tightened. He didn't understand the full story, but he didn't need to. A child was crying for her mother, that was enough. "Show me," he said softly. The girl hesitated, glancing at the sky where dark clouds swirled. "They said humans are monsters," she whispered. Jack knelt down so she could see his eyes. "Maybe some people did bad things," he said quietly. "But not all humans are monsters, I promise I'll help." She looked at him for a long second, then nodded. Holding her blanket close, she led him through the rocky path. The ground was rough, and the air colder as they went deeper. Jack could see strange symbols carved into the rocks, signs of an alien tribe he didn't recognize. The girl stumbled once, and he caught her hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling, but she didn't pull away. When they reached the ravine, Jack's heart pounded. Under a sharp ledge tied with thick cables lay an alien woman. Her body was bruised, her breathing weak. Her silver-blue skin shimmered faintly under the dim light. Jack hurried forward and knelt beside her. "She's alive," he said with relief. The child fell beside her mother, crying softly. "Mommy, I brought someone, a human." The woman's eyes fluttered open. She looked at Jack, confused and afraid. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You... human... why?" Jack didn't stop to explain. He pulled a knife from his belt and began cutting the cables. "Because you're alive, that's all that matters." The cords were tough, leaving deep marks on her wrists. He worked fast, ignoring the sting of the cold wind. When the last cable snapped, the woman slumped forward. Jack caught her, steadying her against his arm. Her breathing was shallow, but she was conscious. "You're safe now," he said. The little girl hugged her mother, tears streaking her pale cheeks. "I told you he'd help," she whispered. The woman looked at Jack again, disbelief in her tired eyes. "Humans never come here," she said softly. "We thought you were gone. Long ago." Jack smiled faintly. "Guess you found one." He glanced at the dark sky. Thunder rolled in the distance. "We need to move. Can you walk?" The woman tried, but pain made her stumble. Jack lifted her gently in his arms. She was light, her skin cold against his jacket. The child followed close, clutching his coat. As they started back toward the ridge, strange screeches echoed behind them. The night creatures were real. Dark shapes crawling from the cracks in the rocks, glowing eyes watching. Jack tightened his grip. "Run," he said calmly. The girl held his belt as he carried her mother. They raced through the narrow trail, dust rising with every step. The creatures hissed and followed, their claws scraping the stones. Jack turned once, firing his plasma pistol. The light burst lit the path, sending one of the creatures shrieking into the dark. When they finally reached a small cave, Jack pushed them inside and set the woman down gently. He sealed the entrance with his emergency field barrier, a thin wall of light that would hold until dawn. The girl clung to her mother's hand. Jack sat near the entrance, catching his breath. The alien woman looked at him, voice weak but filled with emotion. "You risked your life fighting for strangers." Jack looked back at her, his eyes tired but kind. "You're not strangers anymore," the little girl whispered. "Thank you, human." Jack smiled softly. "Call me Jack." Outside, the wind howled across the wasteland. Inside the cave, for the first time in days, warmth filled the cold silence, the fragile start of trust between two worlds that had long forgotten each other. The storm raged outside the cave all night, but inside, the small group found warmth and safety. Jack stayed awake most of the time, checking the field barrier and keeping his pistol close. The alien woman and her child slept beside a small light he'd placed near them. The child's breathing was calm now, no longer broken by fear. For the first time since arriving on this planet, Jack felt he was doing something right. When dawn came, the twin suns rose slowly over the horizon, painting the world with silver light. Jack stepped out of the cave, scanning the horizon with his visor. The storm had passed, but he saw signs of danger, footprints, heavy ones, leading toward the east. The raiders were still out there. He turned back to the cave and found the alien woman awake, her daughter sitting beside her. Jack crouched near them and smiled gently. "Morning. How are you feeling?" The woman's voice was still weak. "Better. My name is Sarai. My daughter is Lyra." Jack nodded. "I'm Jack. I think we should move soon. Those who tied you up may come back." Lyra's small hand clutched her mother's arm. "They will come for us again," she whispered. Sarai touched her daughter's head softly. "They took many from our village," she said. "They wanted slaves for their mines. When I refused, they left me to die." Jack felt anger rise in his chest. "Not if I can help it," he said. "We'll find your people and we'll get them back." Sarai looked at him with surprise. "Why would you do that for us?" Jack stood up and looked at the brightening sky. "Because no one else will." He packed his small emergency kit and handed Sarai a flask of water. She drank slowly, her hands still shaking. Lyra smiled shyly at Jack and whispered, "You're brave for a human." He chuckled softly. "I've been called many things, but that one's new." They left the cave, walking across the barren plain. Sarai leaned on Jack for support while Lyra carried the blanket around her shoulders. The world around them was vast and quiet, broken only by the sound of wind and distant thunder. Strange plants with glassy leaves shimmered in the light. As they walked, Jack tried to reach his rescue beacon. He tapped the device on his wrist, but the signal was still too weak. "We'll have to get to higher ground," he said. "Maybe from there I can reach my ship." Sarai stopped suddenly. "Your ship?" she asked carefully. "Humans still travel the stars?" Jack nodded slowly. "We do. Not many, though. Earth's far away, but we still try to help when we can." Sarai looked down, her eyes full of thought. "My people. They told stories about humans. Some said you vanished. Others said you became monsters." Jack smiled a little, but his eyes were sad. "Maybe both stories are true, depending on who you meet." They continued walking for hours until they reached a ridge. Jack saw a thin trail of smoke in the distance. "That could be your village," he said. Sarai froze. "No," she whispered. "That's the raiders' camp." Jack knelt behind a rock and looked through his visor. He saw metal tents, a few grounded hover bikes, and cages near the center. Cages holding living beings. He counted at least 10 prisoners, mostly Sarai's kind. Some were hurt, others silent with fear. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. "Mommy, our people are there." Jack's hands clenched. "We can't fight them head-on," he said quietly. "There are too many." Sarai looked at him, her voice trembling but firm. "Then we wait for night. I can distract them. You free the cages." Jack shook his head. "No, you're still weak. I'll handle the distraction. Lyra looked at him with wide eyes. You'll get hurt. Jack smiled softly. I've been hurt before. Besides, humans heal faster than they break. They hid in the rocks until dusk. As the suns dipped below the horizon, Jack crept closer to the camp. The raiders were tall, reptilian creatures, covered in gray armor. They laughed loudly around a fire, drinking and shouting in their own language. Jack moved silently, using shadows for cover. He threw a small device near the far edge of the camp. It exploded with a flash of light and sound. The raiders turned instantly, weapons drawn. Jack took the chance. He rushed to the cages and used his plasma cutter to melt the locks. One by one, the prisoners stumbled out, confused but grateful. Stay low, he whispered. Head for the ridge, quietly. Lyra and Sarai watched from the rocks, hearts pounding. They saw Jack move from cage to cage, freeing everyone he could, but one raider spotted him and shouted. Energy bolts flew through the air. Jack ducked, rolled, and fired back. The blast hit one of the raiders, knocking it down. He ran toward the last cage, cutting it open as the prisoners fled into the night. Sarai couldn't stay hidden any longer. She ran down to help, ignoring her pain. Lyra followed, tears streaming down her cheeks. When they reached Jack, he was breathing hard but smiling. They're free, he said. Suddenly, a loud roar echoed behind them. The raider leader, twice the size of the others, stepped forward with a heavy blade. Jack pushed Sarai and Lyra behind him. Run, he said calmly. Sarai's voice broke. No, you'll die. Jack raised his weapon, eyes fixed on the monster. Not tonight. The battle was fierce, the clash of light and metal lighting the dark plain. When the dust settled, the raider fell, defeated. Jack dropped to one knee, tired but alive. Sarai rushed to him, tears of relief falling down her face. You saved them all, she whispered. Jack looked at the freed prisoners running toward the hills. No, he said softly. We saved them together. The night wind blew across the plains as stars filled the alien sky. For the first time, Sarai felt hope, and a strange warmth toward the human who had risked everything for her people. The night after the rescue was quiet, but no one could sleep easily. The freed villagers huddled together near a cliff, while Jack kept watch with his plasma pistol ready. The sky above shimmered with twin moons, their light washing over the rocky plains. Lyra sat beside her mother, holding her hand. Every so often she looked at Jack, who stood at the edge of the camp, his face serious and tired. Sarai whispered softly to her daughter. He saved us all, she said. Even when he had nothing to gain, Lyra nodded. He's different from the stories. When dawn came, Jack walked over to them with a small smile. We can't stay here, he said. They'll come back for revenge. We have to move to safer ground. One of the rescued villagers, an older alien man with pale blue skin, stood up and nodded. There's an old shelter in the mountains, he said. It was built long ago, before the wars. We can hide there. Jack looked at Sarai. Can you travel? She nodded slowly. I can now, thanks to you. They began the long walk toward the mountains. Jack walked ahead, scanning with his visor for any sign of danger. The villagers followed, weak but determined. The air grew colder as they climbed higher, and thin mist curled around the rocks. Lyra walked beside Jack, her small steps trying to match his. Do all humans fight like you? She asked curiously. Jack chuckled. Some do. Most just try to survive. And were you a soldier? She asked, his smile faded slightly. Once, a long time ago. Sarai walked close behind and noticed his expression. You lost someone, she said quietly. Jack didn't answer for a moment. Yeah, he said finally. A lot of good people. The path narrowed as they climbed. Strange blue plants grew between the rocks, glowing softly in the thin air. When they reached the top, they found a large stone structure hidden among cliffs. It was half buried and covered with vines, but still strong. The old man smiled. This is it, he said. Our ancestors built it to survive the great storms. Jack helped push the heavy door open. Inside, the air was cold and still. The walls were made of ancient metal, and strange symbols glowed faintly in the dark. The villagers slowly entered, whispering with awe. Lyra ran around, exploring every corner, her laughter echoing softly. Jack set up his small communicator near the doorway and tried again to reach his ship. The screen flickered but stayed red, no signal. He sighed and rubbed his temples. Sarai walked up beside him. Still nothing? She asked. Not yet, he said. But this place is good cover. I can boost the signal from here with a little work. Sarai looked around. You could stay with us, she said softly. At least until your people find you. Jack nodded. Yeah, I'm not going anywhere until you're safe. As the villagers settled in, Sarai gathered a few of them to prepare food from what they'd carried. Lyra brought Jack a small bowl of something warm that smelled like herbs and fruit. It's not human food, she said shyly, but it's good. Jack smiled and tasted it. It's better than anything I've had in weeks, he said honestly. The girl giggled. Later that night, as everyone rested, Jack sat near the doorway again. The communicator blinked faintly. The signal was getting stronger. But before he could adjust it further, the ground trembled slightly. A deep rumble echoed from below the cliffs. Jack jumped to his feet. Everyone inside now, he shouted. The villagers froze as a sound like thunder rolled through the air. From the valley below, lights appeared. The raiders had returned, and they had brought machines with them. Giant metal walkers moved slowly across the plain, their searchlights cutting through the dark. Sarai grabbed Lyra and ran to Jack. We can't fight that, she said in fear. Jack's mind raced. Maybe we don't have to. This place, it's old, but maybe it still has power. He ran to a panel built into the wall, brushing away dust. Strange symbols glowed under his fingers. If this is what I think it is, he muttered. He pressed a few buttons and the floor began to hum. The air shimmered with faint energy. Sarai stared in disbelief. You can read this? Not really, Jack said. But technology has its patterns. Old worlds, new worlds, they're all built on the same logic. Outside, the first of the raider machines fired. A bolt of plasma hit the side of the mountain, shaking the shelter. Lyra screamed and clung to her mother. Jack shouted over the noise, Everyone to the lower level! They rushed down a set of stairs as the old man led the way. The deeper they went, the louder the hum became. When they reached the bottom, the floor glowed bright blue. A large circular device stood in the center, half buried in rock. Jack stared at it in awe. This isn't just a shelter, he said slowly. It's a reactor, maybe even a power station. Sarai looked at him, eyes wide. Can it protect us? Jack studied the controls. If I can get it running at full strength, maybe. But it could also blow this whole mountain apart if I'm wrong. The rumbling grew louder. Dust fell from the ceiling. Lyra's small voice trembled. Please, Jack, don't let them take us. He looked at her, then at Sarai and nodded. I won't. Jack began working fast, connecting wires from his own communicator to the alien console. Sparks flew and light filled the room. The old machine roared to life, ancient energy surging through the metal walls. Outside, the raiders fired again, but the bolts hit an invisible barrier, flashing harmlessly in the air. The villagers gasped in awe. Sarai looked at Jack as the light from the shield reflected in his eyes. You did it, she whispered. Jack smiled faintly, sweat running down his face. Let's hope it holds until morning. Outside, the machine circled the mountain, firing again and again. But the ancient barrier held strong, powered by the combined spark of human courage and forgotten alien technology. As dawn slowly rose, the villagers saw something they hadn't seen in years, hope glowing brighter than fear. And standing at the center of it all was one human, watching the horizon, ready for whatever came next. The morning light broke over the mountains, washing the sky with pale gold. Inside the ancient shelter, the villagers woke to silence. The thunder of the night attack had stopped. Jack stood near the entrance, his armor scratched and dusty, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The alien barrier still shimmered faintly around the cliffs, glowing like a veil in the rising sun. For now it held strong. Sarai walked up beside him quietly, her daughter Lyra still half asleep in her arms. Did they leave? She asked softly. Jack nodded. For now. They pulled back before sunrise. Maybe they think we're protected by some ancient weapon. Sarai looked at him with worry. They'll return. They always do. Jack sighed and rubbed his tired eyes. Yeah, I know. That's why we need a plan before they come back. He glanced down at the small communicator on his wrist. Signal's stronger now. I might finally reach my team. Lyra peeked up at him, her silver blue eyes wide. You'll leave then? She asked quietly. Jack knelt down to her level, smiling gently. If my people come, we'll make sure all of you are safe first. I don't leave anyone behind, okay? The little girl smiled shyly and hugged him. Sarai watched the scene with soft eyes, a strange warmth in her heart she couldn't explain. Later that morning, Jack and a few of the older villagers explored the deeper parts of the shelter. They found long corridors filled with ancient machines, strange lights still glowing after centuries. Who built this place? Jack asked, running his fingers over the metal walls. The old man replied slowly. Our ancestors said it was made by travelers from the stars. They taught our people long ago, before the wars. Some think they were humans, Jack smiled faintly. Looks like they wanted you to remember you're not alone. He studied the hologram carefully, then turned back toward the others. This technology might be able to send a stronger signal to my ship. If I can link it with my communicator, help could come sooner. Sarai nodded. Do what you must. We'll help however we can. The villagers worked together as Jack explained what to do. Even Lyra carried small tools, eager to help. Hours passed as they connected wires, adjusted circuits, and cleared dust from the glowing panels. It was tiring work, but it gave everyone purpose. As evening approached, the device finally came alive with a deep hum. Jack's communicator beeped rapidly. He leaned close, hope in his eyes. This is Captain Jack Reynolds of the Terran Rescue Corps, he said quickly. I'm stranded on Cathar with survivors. Hostile raiders nearby. Request immediate extraction. For a moment, only static filled the air. Then faintly a voice replied, Signal received, Captain. Coordinates locked. 24 hours, Jack exhaled in relief. They heard us. Lyra clapped her hands with excitement. We're saved. Sarai smiled, her eyes shining. You did it. But Jack's face grew serious again. Not yet. The raiders will return before then. We have to hold this place for one more night. The word spread through the villagers. Fear mixed with courage as they began preparing. Jack taught them how to use the old energy panels as shields, how to block the narrow entrances with metal beams. Sarai and Lyra helped carry supplies while others set up watch near the cliffs. When the sun set, the mountains turned dark and cold again. The villagers waited in silence. Jack stood at the entrance, weapon ready, eyes scanning the darkness below. Then faint lights appeared. The raiders had returned. This time there were more machines, more soldiers, and a larger warship hovering in the sky. Sarai stood beside him, her face pale. There are too many, she whispered. Jack didn't flinch. Doesn't matter. We fight smart, not loud. He tapped his communicator and activated the barrier again. The mountain glowed faintly as the shield rose around them. The first blast hit a moment later, lighting the sky. The villagers ducked as the mountains shook. Jack aimed and fired his pistol, targeting one of the lead walkers. The blast hit perfectly and the machine fell in flames. But there were still dozens more. Sarai ran to bring him extra power cells. You can't do this alone, she shouted over the noise. Jack reloaded and grinned briefly. Then it's good I'm not alone. The villagers, inspired by his bravery, began throwing rocks and firing energy spears scavenged from fallen raiders. The air filled with fire and light. The barrier flickered under the heavy attack, but it held. Lyra hid behind a boulder, clutching her mother's hand. He won't stop, will he? She asked. Sarai watched Jack fighting at the front, his armor glowing faintly in the energy blasts. No, she said softly. He won't stop until we're safe. The battle raged through the night. Jack's energy cells were nearly empty and the barrier was growing weak. Then, as dawn approached, a new sound echoed through the air, the deep hum of engines. Jack looked up and saw bright lights cutting through the clouds. That's them, he breathed. Rescue team inbound. The Terran ship descended, firing beams that scattered the raiders. Within minutes, the enemy fled into the desert, leaving smoke and silence behind. The villagers cheered, tears streaming down their faces. Jack leaned against a rock, exhausted but smiling. Sarai ran to him and placed her hand on his shoulder. You kept your word, she said softly. He nodded. Told you I wouldn't leave anyone behind. As the rescue ship landed, the dawn light spread across the land. The villagers had survived, not because of power or weapons, but because one human refused to turn away from a cry for help. And as the first rays of sun touched the mountains, Lyra whispered with a smile, he's our hero now. The morning after the battle was bright and calm. The mountain air felt fresh and sunlight glowed softly through the thin mist. For the first time in many days, there was peace. The villagers stood outside the ancient shelter looking at the clear sky. The Terran rescue ship hovered nearby, its sleek silver surface reflecting the light. Jack stood with his hands on his hips, studying the ship as the crew unloaded supplies. He looked tired, but there was a calm strength in his eyes. Sarai walked toward him, her daughter Lyra holding her hand. "Your people came," she said quietly. "You can go home now." Jack turned and smiled faintly. "Yeah, but I'm not sure I'm ready to leave just yet." Lyra tilted her head curiously. "Why, don't you miss your home?" Jack looked at the horizon. Home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's the people you help along the way. Sarai looked at him for a long moment. "You've done enough, Jack. You've given us hope again. We'll never forget it." The Terran commander walked over and saluted. "Captain Reynolds, good to see you alive. We picked up your signal 2 days ago but lost contact during the storm." Jack nodded. "You got here just in time. The raiders won't be back for a while." The commander looked at the group of villagers. "Locals?" Jack nodded again. "They were prisoners. Slaves in the mines. We freed them." The commander's expression softened. "Then I'll make sure they get medical aid and supplies." "You've done well, Captain." But Jack didn't look satisfied. He turned back toward the smoking horizon. "They'll come back one day," he said. "And these people need a way to defend themselves. We can't just leave them unarmed." The commander sighed. "Our orders are only to extract Terran personnel, not to interfere in local conflicts." Jack's jaw tightened. He looked at the villagers, people who had nothing but each other. He thought of Lyra's frightened eyes, Sarai's strength, and the way they had stood together even when everything seemed lost. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "doing the right thing matters more than orders." Sarai stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. "Jack will survive. You gave us something more powerful than weapons. You reminded us we can fight back." The commander looked between them and finally gave a small nod. "We'll leave behind some energy cells, field tools, and a short-range beacon. It's not much, but it's something." Jack smiled slightly. "That's all I ask." The rest of the day was spent preparing. The crew repaired damaged walls, while villagers carried crates of supplies into the shelter. Lyra followed Jack everywhere, asking questions about Earth and his ship. He told her stories of oceans, forests, and blue skies that stretched forever. She listened with wide eyes, amazed by every word. When evening came, the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the land. The rescue ship's engines hummed softly, ready for departure. Jack stood near the landing ramp, his helmet tucked under one arm. Sarai approached him slowly. "You're leaving," she said. He nodded. "My team needs to report back. But I'll make sure your world is marked as protected territory. No one should enslave or harm your people again." Sarai's eyes glistened with emotion. "And if they try?" Jack smiled. "Then they'll answer to Earth." Lyra ran up and hugged him tightly. "Don't forget us, Jack," she said. He knelt down and hugged her back. "Never. You be brave, little one. You've got your mother's courage." When he stood up, Sarai took a small pendant from around her neck, a crystal that glowed faintly blue, and placed it in his hand. "A memory stone," she said softly. "It holds moments of the heart, so you won't forget us either." Jack looked at it, touched. "I'll keep it safe." The engines roared to life, lifting dust and light into the air. The villagers watched as the human ship rose slowly above the mountains. Lyra waved until it vanished into the clouds. Inside the ship, Jack sat quietly by the window, holding the pendant in his hand. The commander glanced at him. "You've seen a lot out there, Captain. You think they'll make it?" Jack looked out at the stars. "Yeah," he said softly. "They'll make it. They've got heart. That's something no weapon can beat." Days later, as the Terran ship traveled through deep space, Jack placed the pendant on his console. Its faint blue light glowed against the cold metal walls, reminding him of a frightened child's cry and the courage that followed. Somewhere far behind, on the dusty world of Cathar, Sarai and her people rebuilt their lives. The ancient shelter became their new home, powered by the same technology that had saved them. They planted crops near the valley, raised children, and told stories of the human who had come from the stars when all hope was lost. Lyra grew stronger each day. Every night she looked up at the sky and whispered, "Good night," Joss peered through the rocks. "The crops are growing well," one elder said. "Soon we will have enough to trade again," Sarai nodded. "That is good. But we must stay alert. The raiders may still watch us from the desert." The old man sighed. "Perhaps they have learned to fear us after what happened." Sarai smiled faintly. "They didn't fear us. They feared him, the human. Lyra listened quietly from behind her mother. "He'll come back," she said confidently. Jack promised. The elders chuckled softly, but Sarai only smiled. "Maybe one day," she whispered. That same night, far above the planet, a Terran patrol ship passed near Cathar's orbit. Inside, Captain Jack Reynolds looked down at the familiar world through the viewing window. "It's still there," he murmured. His new mission had brought him close again after months of patrol in nearby systems. But when he scanned the surface, something made his heart tighten. Energy readings, strong and unfamiliar, glowed near the mountain where he'd left Sarai's people. "Sir," the navigator said, "we're detecting a new signal on the planet. Not standard Terran frequency." Jack leaned closer. "Can you isolate it?" The man nodded. "It's faint but repeating. Looks like a beacon message from that old structure you found." Jack's eyes widened slightly. "Put it on speaker." A soft rhythmic tone filled the room, then a voice, Sarai's, came through the static. "To any listening ships, this is the Cathar Mountain Colony. We seek peaceful contact. Our shield generator is failing, and we fear the raiders will return." Jack straightened immediately. "Prepare for descent," he ordered. Within the hour, the Terran ship entered the planet's atmosphere. Fire streaked across the sky as they cut through the clouds. On the ground, villagers looked up in wonder and fear. Lyra ran to the cliffs, pointing at the glowing light. "Mom, it's him! It's Jack!" she shouted. Sarai hurried after her, her heart racing. She saw the silver ship descending near the valley. The same kind of ship she remembered from before. When the dust settled, a figure stepped out. Tall, armored, and unmistakably human. Jack removed his helmet, smiling as he saw familiar faces. Lyra ran forward and hugged him tightly before anyone could stop her. "You came back!" she cried. He laughed softly, lifting her off the ground. "Told you I wouldn't forget." Sarai approached, her eyes filled with relief and emotion. "Jack, you really came." He nodded. "Your message reached us. I had to see it myself." The villagers gathered around as Jack and his team unloaded supplies. "We brought shield parts and medical kits," he said. "We'll fix your power system for good this time." Sarai smiled. "You didn't have to come all this way." Jack looked around the valley, at the rebuilt homes, the fields, and the children. "Yes, I did," he said softly. "You're not just survivors anymore. You're a colony, a beginning, and beginnings deserve protection." For 2 days, the Terrans worked alongside the villagers. Jack repaired the ancient generator, teaching the younger ones how to maintain it. Sarai organized the workers, and Lyra never left Jack's side. She followed him everywhere, asking about stars, ships, and Earth. "Will humans and my people ever live together?" she asked one evening. Jack looked at her kindly. "Maybe one day, when fear is gone and trust grows stronger." As the sun set, the mountains glowed orange and gold. Sarai joined him on the ridge, watching the view. "You've changed since last time," she said quietly. Jack smiled faintly. "So have you. You've built something amazing here." She looked at the distant lights of the village. "You gave us the courage to start. Before you came, we only survived. Now we live." The next morning, the repaired shield shimmered around the mountain again, stronger than before. The Terran engineers finished their work, ready to leave. But before boarding, Jack called the villagers together. "This world is now under Terran protection," he said firmly. "If any raider fleet returns, they'll face us first." The crowd cheered, voices echoing across the valley. Sarai stepped forward and bowed her head slightly. "Thank you, Jack. Not just for saving us, but for believing in us." Jack looked at her and smiled warmly. "You believed first. I just followed your lead." Lyra hugged him one last time, slipping a small carved stone into his pocket. "So you'll never forget again," she said. He laughed gently. "You're learning from your mother." As the Terran ship lifted off once more, the villagers watched the light fade into the sky. This time, they didn't feel left behind. They felt connected to something greater. High above, Jack sat at his console, the little carved stone beside the glowing blue pendant. He looked out at the stars and whispered to himself, "Some promises don't end, they just travel farther." And below, under the twin moons of Cathar, Sarai stood with her daughter, watching the stars fade into the dawn. Hope had returned, and this time, it was there to stay. The twin suns of Cathar rose again, spilling golden light across the rebuilt valley. Months had passed since Jack's return and the Terran shield installation. Life had become calm, almost peaceful. The villagers worked their fields, children played along the river, and laughter filled the once haunted cliffs. Yet beneath the peace, Sarai felt unease. She often stood on the ridge at dusk, staring at the sky where Jack's ship had vanished again. Something deep inside told her that the quiet would not last. The galaxy, she had learned, never stayed silent for long. One morning, a strange vibration rippled through the ground. The crops trembled, birds scattered into the air. Lyra ran toward her mother, eyes wide. "Mom, the shield, it's flickering." Sarai rushed to the control station carved into the mountain. The shimmering blue barrier that protected the valley was blinking, its edges fading in and out. The old man who watched the system shouted, "Something is draining its power." Before Sarai could respond, the communicator on the console lit up. A voice, rough and metallic, filled the air. "To the Cathar colony. You are under Dominion rule now. Surrender your energy core or be destroyed." The villagers froze in fear. Sarai's heart pounded. The Dominion. She'd heard the name whispered before, a fleet that conquered worlds and enslaved survivors. She turned to the elder. "We must contact the Terrans." The old man nodded shakily. "But the beacon can't reach them if the shield falls." Sarai looked at her daughter, who clung to her arm. "Then we hold it until they come." Far away, on a Terran command vessel patrolling nearby systems, Jack sat in the control room reading reports. When the distress signal from Cathar came through, faint but unmistakable, he was already on his feet before anyone spoke. "Set course immediately," he ordered. The crew moved fast. Within minutes, the ship jumped through space, streaking toward the planet he could never forget. On Cathar, explosions shook the ground. Dominion ships, dark, sharp, and silent, descended through the clouds. The villagers ran for the shelters as Sarai directed everyone calmly but firmly. "Stay underground. Protect the children." Lyra pulled at her sleeve. "Mom, will Jack come?" Together they fought side by side, humans and aliens shoulder to shoulder. The Dominion troops pressed hard, but the villagers fought with everything they had. Even Lyra, hiding inside the cave, passed power cells to the defenders with steady hands. After hours of battle, the last of the Dominion ships tried to retreat, but Jack's cruiser blocked their escape. "You don't enslave free worlds," he said coldly, and his ship's cannons ended the fight. When the smoke cleared, the valley was scarred but still standing. The villagers emerged slowly, staring at the wreckage in awe. They had survived again. Jack stood on the ridge, his armor dented and scorched. Sarai walked up beside him, her hair blowing in the warm wind. "You came," she said softly. He looked at her and smiled. "You called." Lyra ran up and hugged him tightly. "I knew you'd come back, Jack." He knelt and hugged her back. "You're braver than ever, Lyra. You remind me what humanity really means." As the sun set over the valley, the Terran and Cathar flags fluttered side by side. The two worlds were no longer strangers, and they were allies. The villagers began rebuilding once more, but now they did so with Terran engineers at their side. Before leaving, Jack placed a silver badge on Sarai's hand. "This links to our network," he explained. "You're under Terran protection now officially. No one will ever take this place again." Sarai looked at him with gratitude. "And you? Where will you go next?" Jack smiled faintly. "Wherever someone calls for help." Lyra looked up at him. "You'll come back again, right?" Jack met her gaze, his eyes gentle. "Count on it." He turned to his ship as the villagers waved goodbye. The engines roared softly, lifting into the golden sky. Sarai and Lyra watched until the light disappeared beyond the horizon. That night, under the twin moons, Lyra sat beside her mother on the hill. The stars above shimmered like silver fire. She pointed at one bright light. "That one," she whispered. "That's Jack's star." Sarai smiled and pulled her daughter close. "Maybe it is, or maybe it's the hope he left behind." And across the endless dark of space, aboard a Terran ship gliding between stars, Jack looked out the window and touched the little carved stone she had given him. Its faint light glowed in his palm. He smiled. "Good night, Cathar," he whispered, and somewhere far below, a mother and child whispered back to the stars, "Good night." Human. The bond between them had forged in courage. Kindness and light would never fade, no matter how far the stars carried them apart.